and talk to, a lot of people who I really admire, who I've learned a lot from. And today's episode is a great example of that. Our guest today is Max Blumenthal, who is just one of the best authors and journalists out there. I highly recommend his stuff. His book, Goliath, is one of the best books I've ever read on the Israel-Palestine conflict. And of course, The Gray Zone, where he is a reporter and a founder, has done some of the absolute best reporting over the last 2 years on the Gaza stuff. Just really invaluable work, and particularly to me personally, I mean, I've really benefited from the work they've done. So thank you so much, Max, for taking the time and joining us.
Thank you. And thanks for that warm introduction. I hope I can live up to it. And thanks for all the interventions that you've made since October 7th.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's a wild time. So I want to get into a lot of the Charlie Kirk stuff that you've been reporting on lately, but I got to ask you, just because I have you here and we're recording a day earlier, the show will be coming out on Monday, but today, Sunday, this morning, the Prime Minister of the UK announced their recognition, desire to see a Palestinian state, and then the government of Israel put out a statement about how, they don't recognize this recognition. I'm just curious, because you understand this better than I do. What do you think is the significance of this? I mean, obviously, a Palestinian state will not be. We're not about to realize that anytime soon. And in fact, the destruction of Gaza continues as we speak. But how significant of a moment is this, or what are your thoughts on it?
I think it would be more significant if the European Football Association banned Israel. And it would actually have a material value if the UK and the EU got together and pressured Germany to stop all weapons shipments to Israel. That would actually possibly upend the genocide and save lives. What they're doing here is a hollow gesture to do something. It will have some diplomatic value because it will provide the Palestinian Authority with more of a voice at the UN, but it's the same Palestinian Authority that collaborates on the ground with the Israeli military. There is no Palestinian state on the ground. The West Bank now is a prison. All the cities are completely surrounded by military and settlers, and military behind the settlers. And it's impossible for people in the West Bank to travel between Palestinian people, to travel between their own cities in what's known as Area A. So I don't know where this Palestinian state would be. There have been record new settlement authorizations in the West Bank. And of course, we see Israel right now, as we speak, is destroying Gaza City, which is the administrative, cultural, and governmental base of Gaza. So Gaza would have been part of a Palestinian state, but then again, how would people from the Gaza Strip get to the West Bank? And then where's East Jerusalem in this? Israel has cut off E1, which is a corridor of settlements. They're constructing in this corridor called E1. I've visited it multiple times. And it basically encircles East Jerusalem from the west. So it cuts it off from the Palestinian West Bank. And then you have the apartheid wall, which cuts that off. So there is no possibility under what Israel has done of a Palestinian state at this moment. So it's a hollow gesture. And then what is the enforcement mechanism? How can you tell the Israelis, you must allow people from East Jerusalem to go to the West Bank? They're all part of this state. They all have to be together. You must give them borders. The enforcement mechanism is what BDS, the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement, was created for, which is to pressure Israel. And this is something, the S is for sanctions. So the governments could just sanction the crap out of Israel until they allow Palestinians to live as citizens in their own state. But they're not going to do that because of the internal political pressure they face in the UK from the Israel lobby, which helped get Keir Starmer to where he is. Which destroyed Jeremy Corbyn, who would have actually potentially tried to enforce a Palestinian state. So what really needs to happen right now, what we need to be focused on, is saving lives. And lives can only be saved by cutting off all weapons to Israel and sanctioning Israel. Then this all ends. Then we can talk about, diplomatic paths forward. I personally favor a binational state where everyone has equal rights. But right now, we're witnessing a genocide. It's a Holocaust, and we just need to stop it. And this will not stop it. Then there's one last point to your question. This does elucidate the reality of Israel that I presented in my book, Goliath, which I know you read.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an Israel where there is no one, maybe a few hundred people who actually support a Palestinian state. So everyone says the problem is Netanyahu, big bad Bibi. He's always been against a Palestinian state. He has guaranteed his supporters that he will prevent a Palestinian state. But where's the furthest? Who is the figure furthest to the left of Netanyahu who still has a voice in Israeli politics? His name is Yair Golan. He comes out of, actually, I think, the Meretz party, but he has been a ferocious militarist and supporter of the genocide in Gaza. And he just issued a statement condemning the recognition of a Palestinian state. There's no one in Israeli politics who supports a Palestinian state. And even if they did, they wouldn't support it along 67 borders. So we have to deal with Israel as it is.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I mean, all of that, very good points. I think that, I was always, well, after kind of waking up to the nature of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I always thought of myself as a two-state solution guy. It just seemed to me to be more like of a practical sell. That, look, the Israelis are never going to accept one state because they think that means they lose their entire identity as a Jewish state. So it's an easier sell to just convince people, okay, but you can't occupy them. You got to give them their own sovereignty. And a couple of the things that have made me really re-question that, and as you said there, you think that one democratic state is a better goal to push for. Number one was, when I was reading about the mindset of the Israeli leadership class around the 2005 disengagement from Gaza, and it really was the thing that spooked them, was when the Gaza leadership started pushing for a one-state solution rather than a two-state solution, because they just like that. And so that just got to me. It was like, oh, if that's what they're afraid of, then maybe that makes sense. But the other thing is really what you were getting at there, that there's just been so many. I mean, the purpose of all of these actions have been to make it impossible to ever have a two-state solution. And we're now, if you think back to like Camp David or something like that, well, it's 25 years later, and it's 25 years of putting poison pills and roadblocks in the way of even like the framework of what a two-state solution potentially during Oslo could have been. And so it does seem like the logical conclusion from that is that you're never going to get that, and the best case is to push for one state. And it is, I got to say, I'm sure you agree with me on this, but like, when one of the funniest moments in American politics over the last year certainly was during that debate for the New York City mayoral Democratic primary, where they tried to, it's like how upside down the world is, that their big gotcha of Mamdani was that he said he favors one state with equal rights for all. And somehow, Max, you're supposed to hear that as like a Hitlerian statement of some kind, like equal rights, this monster. And so it does seem like maybe that's just the best thing to push for.
Yeah, I mean, you had like black New York politicians on stage recognizing an ethno-supremacist apartheid state and attacking him for it. It's kind of like an upside down world. And one state solution, or a binational state where everyone has equality under the law, actually does represent a dismantlement of the exclusivist Jewish state. And that's not a problem with a one state solution. It shows what the problem with the so-called Jewish state is, which is that it's an ethno-supremacist state that provides no rights to the indigenous people who actually represent a majority between the river and the sea, who have been there for hundreds and hundreds of years longer than the Jewish settler class. Zionism must be dismantled in order for peace to take root. And until that takes place, we will witness a continuous state of warfare and untold horrors like we have never seen, including waking up every day to see children who Israel defines, because they're not Jewish, as demographic threats being shredded day after day. This isn't also because Israel is, because of the Jewishness of the Israeli state. It's because of the ethno-supremacist character, We had the same problem with apartheid South Africa. We had the same problem with the United States when it was a settler state, which is that until it can ethnically cleanse the indigenous population or crush their resistance, as they tried to do in South Africa, they cannot consolidate the state as a so-called democracy.
Yeah.
And this is why we see like leadership rising in Israel, like Itamar Ben-Gvir or Bezalel Smotrich, but especially Ben-Gvir, because Ben-Gvir said something that he believes something that I actually agree with from another angle that's fundamental to his worldview. And this comes from his mentor, Meir Kahane, who really is, I think, the most towering figure in Israel today. We can talk about who he is, or you can just look him up. It's spelled Kahane. And what he said, what Kahane said and what Ben-Gvir says is you simply cannot have a Jewish and democratic state, which is Israel's selling point to the world. You have to choose, because if you're democratic, you're eventually going to let the Palestinians vote, and they're going to vote in their own politicians and eventually their own prime minister, because they're growing. They're a demographic threat. And so we have to consolidate the Jewishness by eliminating them. And that's what Israel's decided to do in the Gaza Strip. And they're carrying out a Holocaust. I mean, they're openly saying it, that they're trying to push the population out of their homes by blowing their homes up and then driving them into Egypt. That is, so what we're witnessing is the fundamental logic of Zionism playing out in real time.
Yeah. And well, this is what Benny Morris, I think, was saying all those years ago when he was telling the truth. And he said that transfer was always, I forget his exact words, that it was always inherent in the Zionist project. But obviously, yeah, you can only be like, it's, I think, always been the true nature of the Israeli experiment, right? Is that like you can, they want to pay lip service to being a democracy. But the thing is, you like, if you have these two values that are being a Jewish state and being a democracy, well, you can only achieve both of those if you're willing to ethnically cleanse the population. If you're building a state on Arab land, then you have to work out the numbers to be so that you're, I mean, whatever, it's been around 80-20 for most of Israel's existence because they moved the rest of the Arabs out and keep them out. And so those, there it is. Like, you can kind of be one or the other. And it's been at this point so like ingrained in their own conception of themselves, and also in their selling message to the rest of the world is, oh, we're the only democracy in the Middle East. And so in order to be able to say that, they have to keep this amount of pressure. You know, I always think back to, and I'm not saying it's perfect, but it really is fascinating. If you've ever read, I'm sure you have, but if you ever read the write-up on the Israel-Palestine or on the Zionist question in the King Crane Commission after World War I, or they basically, it's not exactly perfect, but they basically get it completely right. They go, man, I mean, this idea of building a Jewish state here is going to take an enormous amount of force to create and maintain. And there's just no way you're going to do this without having a permanent state of war where the Arabs are your enemies indefinitely. And it's like, damn, if that wasn't pretty impressive to think of that in the aftermath of World War I. I mean, but I guess if you're over there, that was just the reality on the ground.
Yeah. And it was at a time of high colonialism around the world. So there were the great powers would have been supportive of this. They just wanted to be in control. And that's why the Zionist movement launched a terrorist campaign against the British Mandate authorities. But one of I think one of the other major intellectual forces who looms large in Israel today, who employed Netanyahu's father, Benjamin Milikowski, in New York, was Zev Jabotinsky, the father of revisionist Zionism. And if you read his seminal essay, The Iron Wall, which Israel's first prime minister, who was a labor Zionist, sort of more socialist-oriented Zionist, actually adopted, what Jabotinsky openly says in that essay is the native population has always resisted colonialism. Just look at what's happening in Africa. Look at the Native Americans. The Palestinian, he didn't call them Palestinians, but the Arabs will resist us as well. And the only way that we can build a Jewish state is with an iron wall of bullets and bayonets. And so many Israeli leaders, Moshe Dayan, for example, in a famous speech at the Gaza border in 1953, said the same thing. Moshe Dayan said, We cannot we cannot plow a field or build a home without the steel helmet or the automatic cannon. So this is just a straightforward colonial mentality, and it's playing out at a time when of post-colonialism throughout the world, when post-colonial countries like China are rising to global superpower status. So Israel's completely anachronistic, and they're wondering why everyone is disgusted by what they're doing. Everyone hates them, and it's because they belong to another much worse era. And the only thing holding them up is Washington and its continuous supply, its air bridge of baby buster bombs.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is why the kind of the control of the American propaganda machine has always been so important to the Zionist cause, because that's really what it comes down to. And so that's a good transition into what we were going to talk about today, which of course is the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and the reporting that you've done since then on what exactly the relationship between Charlie Kirk and the Israeli government and the broader kind of Israel lobby and Zionist influencer class. And this is a very interesting topic to me. I was somewhat involved in a lot of these, in the center of what the controversy was about, although I do think it was more about Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly than it was about me. But so, it seemed like that did. Although, I think for a while, there were a lot of people who were actually pretty pissed off about me being there. And I think in some ways, because I'm not nearly as big a name, particularly in like right wing or like Republican turning point type events, but I'm not nearly as big a high profile figure as Tucker Carlson or Megyn Kelly. And so me being there, I always thought was it demonstrated more of a choice on Charlie's part. Like, he didn't have to have me there. Whereas like Tucker Carlson, I mean, if you can get him at Turning Point USA, how are you not going to have the biggest right-wing voice in America there? But anyway, let me ask you like the broadest of questions that you could kind of take in whatever direction you want to. With the whole Charlie Kirk thing and the reporting that you've been doing on it, where are you right now? Like, what do you think the story is here? What do you think is important for people to understand about this?
Well, I'm working on a news story, and it's pretty much along the same lines as all the other stories I've been reporting, which is that, in the days and weeks before his death, Charlie Kirk was facing not just increasing Zionist pressure as the date approached of his first appearance on his campus-wide cross-country tour, but that actually he was bleeding Zionist donations. And I got the name of a major donor who apparently pulled out. I haven't dropped the piece yet, so I don't want to sell it out, but I just got him on the phone and he hung up on me when I asked him about it. So it seems like there's a there. And that they were pretty upset at Charlie Kirk because there's no space for allowing comic Dave Smith on stage for debate. There's no space for debate on this issue. It doesn't matter what the purpose of the debate is. There's no, it's like how they say there should be no daylight between the United States and Israel. Charlie Kirk was allowing daylight.
Right.
Everything I reported is backed up by public statements by Charlie Kirk and now by someone who had positioned himself as his personal Israeli handler. It's a guy named Rabbi Pesach Wolicki. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's from a group called Israel 365 Action, which is apparently funded by the Falak family of Duty Free America, who sponsored the settlement, illegal settlement enterprise in the West Bank, real hardliners. He's also close to Regent University, which is funded by Pat Robertson. He's one of these rabbis that like his job is to groom Christians in the United States to support Israel and to support them as much as possible. I got some documents that his group had been sending to conservative influencers, offering them like free tours of Israel, biblical sites, going to Gaza, the Gaza border, etc. And he actually has given a series of interviews where he said that he was talking to Charlie Kirk almost every day leading up to his tour and giving him talking points, and that they were kind of having there was a running argument, and that Charlie Kirk, he said, was believing a lot of things he heard in the media, and that there were people close to him who were pushing him to be more anti-Israel, and that they spoke like almost like the day before his Utah Valley University fateful speech, where he was horrifically killed, there were also all these Zoom meetings leading up to Charlie Kirk's final days that I learned about, including with Joshua Hammer, this really charismatic figure that you debated. I don't know how you stood up to that. Just blizzard of facts. But he's one of Netanyahu's young voices in the media, a Newsweek editor. Sean McGuire, who's emerging as sort of like this junior Bill Ackman figure, who's a venture capitalist, very close to Elon, owns a house in Israel. He was on the Zoom call. He actually deleted a tweet where he mentioned the Zoom call, which is interesting. So Charlie Kirk was just under constant pressure. And just imagine having like this cabal of representing a sort of niche movement that is giving you enormous amounts of money and offering you more in order to say what they want, just constantly calling you. Rabbi Wolicki said they were planning to set up a WhatsApp group to feed Charlie talking points throughout his tour. And they said they were very worried because people were asking him about Gaza and the genocide, and they didn't want him to go off script. But just imagine having those people in your ear all the time, just constantly managing you. And that's what this Hamptons influencer retreat was as well, that I had exposed. I broke that story. I mean, there were a lot of people there were rumors going around about it. And Bill Ackman, who's one of the biggest pro-Netanyahu money men in the country, this investor who's worth $9 billion, sort of convened the meeting in coordination with Charlie Kirk and what Ackman's agenda was there. And I think there was a larger agenda with deeper forces that were sort of embedding themselves into TPUSA as entities like the Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire failed. What they wanted to do is basically buy impressions for Israel. So they were cultivating all of these young influencers to go to Israel, to say whatever Israel wanted. I mean, just go to the Instagram page right now of Xavier DeRousseau of PragerU, which is like an Israeli, I consider it basically an Israeli cutout. Like Marissa Straight, who runs that, is a veteran of Israel's cyber spying division, Unit 8200. And she's supposed to be like creating the next generation of America first. But go to this guy's Instagram page, like every subject. This is a young black man from Louisiana. Every subject is like Zionism, Israel. It's obvious what he's doing. He's like a paid actor. He's a talented paid actor. He's a paid actor for these Zionist billionaires. And so they were trying to groom more and like bring in like attractive women, anything that will keep the looming collapse of Israel's standing within the conservative movement from finally taking place. And where Charlie Kirk was not where we are. He was sort of, I mean, I look at him and I've been following him for 10 years. He's like a natural born political operative. And all he thinks about is politics and votes and getting out the vote in districts and networking, doing media. He's very good at it. I don't agree with anything he said, but he's good at that. And all of a sudden there's this grassroots revolt among young conservatives on Israel, and he faces the Groyper wars, and nobody's like, very few of them support it except for the Jewish conservatives, who are like only 7 or 8% of American Jews even vote Republican. So they're in the minority, but they have more money than, I mean, they command billions of dollars. So he has to answer to them and the conservative grassroots at the same time. And he's stuck in the middle in an impossible position, and he couldn't bridge the divide. And, you know, he's constantly on camera too. And sometimes he would just go off script and start saying the things he would hear from his friends and the things he was feeling. And he may have actually been disgusted by what he was seeing in Gaza. He certainly was opposed to the Iran war. And, you know, my reporting that he was actually going up in the White House and lobbying Trump and others against attacking Iran, which it was like totally forbidden, has been corroborated by J.D. Vance himself. What really seemed to upset Charlie Kirk wasn't, though, like maybe the same things that upset us about this issue. It was that this coterie or cabal of billionaires who really seem only concerned with the fate of a foreign country was telling him what to do in his own country when he was supposed to be the face and voice of America first. And that was driving him crazy in his final days. So look at the reaction right now. I mean, look at the reaction. Candace Owens went live like a half hour after I dropped my piece and provided additional details and gave, a really stirring narrative about the influencer summit based on what she knew. And she is the target of like a tsunami of attacks, all from those very same forces. They're trying to totally destroy her. They're trying to like wipe her off the map the same way they're wiping Gaza off the map. They're overreacting because they can see the writing on the wall. Candace Owens, look at her engagement. I mean, hundreds of thousands of views when she goes live, then millions and millions more. Everyone's the conservative youth, but the whole, like, young people across the country are hanging on her every word. Nobody cares what Ben Shapiro has to say.